My name is Seth. I'm 45 years old. I was a Jehovah's Witness, and now I'm shunned.
All right, Seth. So, how'd you become one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place? Were you born in?
I was born in third generation, both sides, mom and dad.
Gotcha. And do you? So it goes back quite a ways. Were your was your mom and dad, were they always Jehovah's Witnesses throughout their entire lives, or did they kind of bounce in and out at any point?
I'm not exactly sure what age they were when their parents became witnesses. I know they weren't born in. I'm pretty sure my dad was maybe preteen. Same with my mom. But once they were in, they were all in.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, like most people, once you're in, you're all in, at least at a point.
Right.
So, what did it mean to you being raised a witness? How did it make you see the world around you?
Um, I grew up in the satanic panic of the 80s, so I was terrified of demons and being responsible for bringing anything into the house from something I watched to a toy. So that I remember being very afraid of that, and of course Armageddon. But other than that, it seemed. I mean, that's what I knew, what I grew up in. It seemed like a normal life, I guess.
Yeah, I mean it's the satanic panic. I've heard a lot about that. I don't really remember it. I'm sure I was around for some of it as a little kid. Um, but yeah, that's something that's again another instance in the world where something was brought up and people freaked out about it, and you just uh, people believe certain things, and then here we are talking about belief systems. Sometimes people are told things like we were told. We were given a worldview, a panic of sort about the people outside the world, right? In the world, right? Because we were so scared of them, and made oftentimes to not feel like we were a part of things. And it's just funny how all these things kind of come full circle. Um, so for yourself, what was childhood like growing up at home? What was your home life like?
Um, Fairly typical. I thought, even compared to people I knew outside of the truth. Um, we went to meetings 3 nights a week, went out in service every Saturday, Sunday after lunch, and got beaten quite a bit as kids. Me and my siblings. I don't remember ever coming home from a meeting and not getting the belt for something I did. But that seemed to me. I mean, all my friends, their parents were the same way. I just assumed that's the way things were, and it. I don't remember having any real horrible thoughts about my childhood, at least up to the age of 10. And then at 10, my mom got sick with leukemia and died shortly after. And then everything kind of came off the rails after that. But up to that point, I mean, I went to school. I had friends from school that I grew up in a very small town, same town I'm in now. And, everybody knew everybody. My dad had the local gas station in town. And so it was pretty lenient as far as me riding my bike back and forth to school with school friends, and never got to do any sleepovers or stuff like that. So I guess even I didn't have a fear of the outside world, but I grew up in a very small farm community, so but then when my mom got sick and died, that's when things really took a left turn.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, that's a young age to lose your mom, and you know, leukemia. That's really tough as well. Not something that you probably expected. Something that kind of crept up in the family.
Yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere. We went on I think we went to Missouri, Branson or something like that, and we stopped at a Cracker Barrel on the way home, and my mom didn't come out of the bathroom for a long time, and she went to use the restroom and couldn't get back up. So that was the very first sign, and then she got some had some very large abnormal bruising, and so she went and got checked out, and she got a very, I guess, a fairly rare form of leukemia that's mostly found in children and is almost never fatal, and it killed her in like 9 months.
Wow, that's just so fast.
Yeah,
I'm really sorry to hear that. Uh,
thank you.
how what was it like around that time? I mean, you're a young Jehovah's Witness. Your mom is clearly very ill. Did the congregation kind of rally around you guys? I know that like Jehovah's Witnesses are kind of weird about death. They don't often talk about it, or like when someone dies, it's kind of like, well, don't be upset. They're going to be resurrected. So there's almost a denial of death and the pain sometimes that causes. And oftentimes there's not a lot of help around it. People, other than don't think about it, they'll be resurrected. Right. And so, when that happened in your family, did you find any support around that?
Um, Definitely not any emotional support for what was going on. Like I said, our congregation was fairly small. I mean, 50 to 70 attending on a Sunday, and big majority. My dad was one of 10 kids that were all in that area. We're all witnesses, so there was a ton of aunts and uncles and cousins, and so we had a lot of, because there was four of us kids. My sister was the youngest, and she was three, and then my little brother, I think he was probably around five, and then me at 10, and then my older brother is 13, I think. So my dad had his hands full. So we had a lot of help, people helping out, taking care of us, and cooking and cleaning and stuff like that. But it's something I talked to with my older brother years ago, that throughout that whole process, our dad never came to us to see how we were doing with it, if we were doing okay, or in fact, my mom got sick pretty quick, to the point where she was in and out of comas here and there. But before that got to that point, I think I was in fifth grade. I lost it at school, just came unglued, was bawling, and so they had to come get me. And my mom was furious with me, and I just thought that was so odd, that I was just heartbroken, and she was mad that I wasn't sucking it up. And you know what? I mean, I don't remember ever them saying much about, well, you'll see her in the paradise, but I'm guessing that's probably was the mentality. So emotional support, no, there was none.
Yeah. I mean, you just kind of went by it kind of quickly earlier, but just about like being beaten after the meetings and stuff, that there was going to be a whooping after the meetings. So, it sounds like the situation was kind of one where you were to kind of be controlled, and to, I guess, to fall in line, and not be, I'm sure it caused a problem that broke down in school and had to come home. It was an issue, like in the family, and not seeing your real feelings, but rather just what they had to deal with around it.
Yeah. I grew up that I know my parents loved us, but we were very much the seen and not heard. I had other friends of mine in the congregation that had to call their dad sir, and had to ask to be excused, and we weren't that strict, but it was very much, we weren't I don't know, I don't want to say not part of the family, but we were definitely not in, we had no input in anything. We were just there. We were to do what we were told and fall in line.
Yeah.
And the beatings, I shouldn't laugh about it, but it just seemed normal to me growing up. But then when my mom was sick, and then after she died, it, that what happened after that and how bad they got, to me, was not normal. I mean, that was abuse. I'm sure it all was, but it started becoming pretty bad.
Gotcha. Well, I guess let's talk about that a little bit, just the changes that occurred around that time. So your mom has died. You're not really getting the help you need. Chances are, your dad's not getting the help he needs either. And nobody, again, nobody's really talking about this usually in a healthy way, and grieving it, but rather kind of escaping into the resurrection hope. Um, you mentioned things were changing. So how did the environment kind of change, when we're talking about, uh, at home, at the Kingdom Hall, how did this all kind of feed in together after your mom passed away?
Um, as far as like meetings and stuff, none of that really changed. I mean, that I used to say I give my dad credit for that. That no matter what was going on in our lives, we were always at the meetings. But that has a whole different meaning to me now. But so that didn't really change. My dad, he was always I didn't know it at the time, but he was a pretty heavy drinker. Um, I think it got heavier after, when my mom got sick, and then after she died. And I remember one time, because she wanted to die at home, so he had an in-house nurse and had a room set up for her and stuff. And it was fairly close to the end, so I know she was hooked up to a lot of IVs and monitors and stuff. And my dad laid into me one afternoon with a wooden boat oar, and just about beat me unconscious. But my mom actually unplugged herself and got him off of me, and I still have physical scars from that. So it definitely went from bad to worse. The home life did, but then my dad kind of checked out a little bit, I guess, too, and gave us a little more room to run around. About that time, my older brother started getting into smoking pot and partying and stuff, and I was just he was my hero. I was so looked up to him and so wanted to be a part of that. And actually, I think it was at 11 or 12 is when I first started getting into drugs and drinking, and my dad was just so preoccupied with everything else. He didn't see it or didn't want to see it. And at that point, I think it was about 11 maybe or so, my older brother started molesting me. And I, I'm a little fuzzy on the timelines. I don't remember if it was before or after my mom had passed, but it was right in that general area. And I remember going to my dad about it, and I believe he was an elder at the time. He'd been an elder off and on, and it's like he didn't even hear me. He didn't ask me one question. Didn't Just got up, walked away, and then never heard anything about it again. And I'm kind of thinking back now. I think he was concerned with his status. If something like that, he can't control his own household, and so that went on for several years, but it started in that time period.
That's I'm sorry that happened. That's terrible too. And this is the older brother that you looked up to so much.
Yes.
Um, and that's really hurtful. And I'm sorry. Just already time and time again, when again, I guess it's the be seen and not heard. Again, you're not being listened to. You're not even really being seen. Not truly for who you are and what's going on at that time, when you're going to your dad and saying this is happening, and he just walks away. So you can see that in the family arrangement, it was pretty strict and pretty somewhat volatile already. I mean, with the beatings after the meetings and things like that. I mean, things weren't super great. And then your mom dies, and now everyone is kind of fractured. Everyone is hurting, and people are turning to different things to escape. Your dad, your brother were turning to substances. You were a little bit as well at a young age. And then your brother starts doing this to you as well. just a lot of pain in the family at a young age.
Yeah, it definitely was. And then in this whole mix, I had a little brother and a little sister that were like 3 and 5
Oh wow.
that, were getting just as little attention as the rest of us. They were just didn't, well, I guess assuming didn't have the same outlets that, my brother had or, uh,
And so who was looking after the 3 and the 5 year old, because everybody else is escaping.
yeah. And at that time, we always had a couple aunts that I just loved dearly that were there all the time.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, they didn't live there, but might as well have. And so, I mean, at that time, we weren't left, completely by ourselves. But my older brother and myself were a little more convincing with our aunts as far as, hey, we're going over here, and we're going somewhere else. And I said that went on for not very long. So I think my mom died in '86, and my dad was remarried by '87.
So very quickly, that's a quick turnaround.
Yeah, he had a sister that lived just outside of Chicago that knew a sister there that was looking for a man, and set them up. And boy, it went really fast, and we got married, and she moved down to where we lived she had a son that was just a little bit older than my older brother, and moved in, and then things went really south really quick. And I think they moved out in less than a year and moved back up outside of Chicago. And I believe it was probably less than 6 months after that, they decided they were getting back together, but we were moving up there.
So what was that like? You suddenly having this stepmother and stepbrother who, just boom, part of your family so quickly, after your mom has died. What was the environment like that caused so quickly, them to take off?
I'm sure a lot of people feel this way about their step parent, but she was insane. She was violent, and it all started. She wanted to erase all memory of our mother. She to this day, I have one picture of my mother. I think some other family members have a couple more, but she destroyed all photo albums, all pictures. Those I don't remember if she just tossed out or she burned them. And I found out sometime later that my mother, when she was dying, wrote all of us kids letters that she wanted us to get when we turned 18 and to read. And she destroyed those too. We never got to see them, never got to read them. Made us get rid of the ashes because her mom was cremated. My dad kept them. Made us get rid of those. Oh boy, I remember time just telling one, it was either me or my younger brother that was upset about something. And she says, "Oh, you want your mommy?" And she come in and threw a shovel on the ground. She goes, "Go dig her up." I mean, she was awful, just horrible. And yeah, so I don't know if it was us kids, or I don't remember much going on with her and my dad other than they fought a lot, and then she moved, was gone. Us kids were thrilled. Best day of our lives, but my dad was just devastated.
Yeah, the best day of your lives was when what?
When she left.
Oh, when she left.
Oh yeah, I can remember. Just that was the happiest we'd been in months and months, and then my dad was just devastated. I don't think he came off the couch for like 3 days after she had moved out.
Yeah. Wow, that's just so much change and upheaval and just mental and physical and emotional abuse throughout your childhood.
She actually accused I guess she would have been 4-year-old sister at the time of having sex with my dad. I remember getting down her face and accusing her of. She said, "I know you're fucking your daddy. I know you're fucking your daddy." She was 4 years old, and this woman was sick. And I did come find out later that her previous husband, she had caught him in bed with a daughter he had from a previous relationship. So, I mean, that doesn't excuse her saying something like that to a 4-year-old, but
No, no,
She was good.
nothing excuses that.
No.
But yeah, it's just another example, though. You know, these are Jehovah's Witness families, and Jehovah's Witnesses like to pretend like they're above the fray. And look, you know, obviously these types of abuses go on in households outside of Jehovah's Witnesses, but Jehovah's Witnesses act like this stuff doesn't happen in their own congregations, and it does. And it's sad. There's so many kids being hurt in different ways. And I mean, like your brother who, you know, was molesting you. Where did he get that idea? Where did that come from? Was that just from him, or was
Oh,
somebody molesting him? It,
now you bring that up. I guess I should have mentioned that. Come to find out that he and another friend somehow were talked into staying with an older brother in a hotel room during an assembly. And I guess both of them were molested by this guy.
it's just so sad. It's just these cycles that are perpetuated, and that, you know, it trickles downhill, and so many, you know, just innocent people are getting hurt. Nobody's healthy here, right? You know, just uh, again, not necessarily good or bad people. We have very unhealthy people that are just caught up in this unhealthy witness dynamic,
Yeah.
and uh, and the relationships are often unhealthy. Families, it's just really sad. So, okay, so your stepmom and stepbrother take off, and then what happens? I think you said you guys got back together.
Yeah. It wasn't that long. I think it was only maybe 6 months, maybe, that she was gone, and they decided they're going to work it out. But we had to come up there. And, you know, my dad was born in this town. I mean, this is all he's ever known. And, you know, had the same business he'd had since before I was born, and, you know, sold it all, got rid of everything. We moved up there. And in the meantime, he went to get a job up there, found a job. So he'd stay all week up there and come back on the weekends. Well, that was the time that me and my older brother really started, you know, because my aunt would stay, and we'd always just tell her, "Hey, Dad said it's okay if we go, you know, stay the night over here." Okay, and then we'd go off and run around and party, and I just look back now. It's crazy how much leash they gave us, and then we're surprised, you know, the stuff we got into. But so then that went on, and they got a house, he got a job, and so we come to move. And the day we go to move, my older brother goes missing. He took off. Well, I had to get the cops involved. That's fine. He didn't want to go. None of us wanted to go. You know, this was our whole life, our families, our friends. You know, I'd only gone to one school my whole life, and so this was between seventh and eighth grade for me. So we move up there, and sure enough, it went south really fast between them, and the relationship with my dad and my older brother started getting really bad. And then he ended up throwing him out. I think he was 16, and that didn't solve the problems. And in between us, my stepmother and my stepbrother are moving in and out, in and out, in and out. You know, she'll leave. She always kept a place, like an apartment on the side. I actually remember the brothers, you know, because they were always in meetings with the brothers, my dad and her, and, you know, they were counseling her on, she kept an apartment the whole time. You know, how can you be committed to somebody? And so it was very tumultuous. And I think my dad took out a lot of his frustrations on me. That's when the beatings got really bad. I mean, I'm talking swollen eyes shut and black eyes and busted mouth, and just, I remember the neighbor called the cops on him one time because he beat me so bloody in the front yard. And cops showed up, and I'm bleeding all over the place, and they did nothing. I mean, they nothing. And so that was about the time I knew I was going to have to find an exit strategy, you know, to get out of that. And in my thinking, I'm thinking, well, my brother's out, you know, I'll leave, and then, you know, call him, and, you know, he'll take care of me. And it didn't happen. I said, Dad and I got into a really bad one night, And he told me to get the fuck out and never come back. And I took off out that door and never looked back. Went and called my brother. He says, "You got to go back home." He says, "I can't help you." And there's no way I was going back home. So I had pretty much was homeless for about 2 years from the age
How old were you at this time?
of
You say
14.
14. Wow, that's awful young to be on the streets.
Yeah. And I guess I skipped a fairly big chunk there. Once we moved up to Elgin and my brother left, well, was thrown out. Um, I I believe in my heart it was a series of events that my dad and stepmother did to try and get rid of me. They had me locked up in a mental institution. Gosh, it was, I don't remember the entire timeline, but it was months until the insurance ran out. And
How
once
did
they,
they get you locked up in a mental institution?
well, I've given this a lot of thought, and I, there's two things that I can think of. One, and this is going to sound really stupid, but I'm like 13 years old, 12 years old, 13. I found a porno mag laying on the street. So I picked it up, took it home, put it between my mattresses. And that night, or the next night after I did that, I guess it was the night after they found it, was the night that the ambulance came pick me up and took. So I think I really attributed it to that, which made no sense to me. But looking back, I was a cutter back then. I cut myself quite a bit, and I do know that that raised an alarm bell with my dad. So I kind of think that may, I said I'm real fuzzy on the timeline, whether that was before or after that time period. So I'm
I'm,
kind of thinking it was before, and that probably had something to do with it.
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Cutting is something that a lot of people inside the organization are cutters, and oftentimes that the actual act of cutting, it's just like so many other things, like sometimes eating disorders or whatever. It's about control. You're in a situation that's completely out of control. Here's one small thing part of my life I can control. I do this thing. This is mine. And obviously it's just reflective of the pain and the issues that are being caused in this family and inside the organization. And I'm just being locked up at that age in some sort of an institution it can be really difficult and traumatizing.
Yeah, it initially it was well, because they woke me up in the middle of the night, and there's my dad, my stepmother, a cop, and a paramedic are standing over me and over my bed at like midnight. And my dad says they're going to take you someplace and ask you a few questions. They just want to evaluate you, make sure you're okay. I said, well, how long? He says, well, I don't know, a couple hours maybe. And so I get there, and then they tell me, no, it's an initial evaluation, like a 3-week evaluation. And I was terrified, and it turns out that the next day when they put me in a regular room with my roommate was a kid that I was in school with that just disappeared one day. And turns out he had tried to commit suicide. And so his parents sent him there. So that was an initial relief because there's someone I wasn't like super friends with, but friendly with. So, he seemed happy to see me, and we got to watch rated R movies on movie nights. And so it was a scary place initially. And it still was off and on during that time period, but I, I, I felt a bit of relief being out of the situation I was in. I kind of even remember at one point, I really didn't even want to go home. But that is as soon as that insurance dried up, and I was out the door. And so I get back home, and I don't think, I don't want to guess it was more than a couple months, if that. And then I'm getting sent to Texas to live with my uncle. And kind of funny, I went to live with my uncle, who was a heavy drinker, and he actually would have me drive him around to some of his cleaning places while he got drunk. I'm 12 years old, 13 years old, driving him around. And then he started getting me drunk a lot. And, as you will find out later in the story, I had quite a drinking problem off and on in my life. I don't remember it before that, but so I don't think it was really sent there to do anything other than just get me out of the house. I think she just couldn't stand me, my stepmother. And so I lived with my uncle. I think it was about maybe a year. I went to school there for most of a year, I think. And then I had a real bad falling out with my uncle, and he beat the hell out of me. I mean, really bad a couple times. And then I went to live with another uncle who lived in a different part of Texas. And that was okay because they had 6 kids that, had moved away few years before that I grew up with, my cousins and stuff, and I loved them all dearly. And I don't remember anything really having a bad falling out or anything, but before too long, I was on a bus back home, and I remember my dad picked me up at the bus station, got back to the house, and my stepmother had moved out, and it was my fault, So that it got really. That's when things. I mean, it had already been really bad, but that's when the physical abuse was, and I was a punching bag, and I still to this day, I'm pretty sure I probably instigated the fight with my dad that final night because I knew he'd tell me to get the hell out, and and I wanted to. And just disclaimer, I was not by any means a perfect kid. I mean, he got called to the school for me smoking pot. I was always getting caught smoking cigarettes. So I was a lot to deal with too. But
Sure, but none of those are reasons to beat your child or send them away or
right,
hit them with a boat oar or all these types of things. Like there's no excuse for that. He's the adult. He's supposed to be the parent, the adult who can handle this stuff. I mean, you may not have been easy to deal with, I'm sure, but that doesn't justify the abuse. There's
no,
no justification for that.
no, not at all.
Yeah. So, all right. So now he's telling you to leave, and you do, and your brother's telling you to go back, and you're saying I can't. So did you say you lived on the streets for 2 years?
Yeah, not like a solid 2 years. I would have occasional. It was friends of my brothers that I I got to know. They were quite a bit older than me, but every once in a while, every one of them would get an apartment for like a month, and there'd be 6 or 8 of us piled in there, people sleeping on the floors and stuff. So anytime that happened, I had a place I could go. I had a good friend of mine that lived right behind us, with the house that my dad lived at. That I could go there when I really needed to. They actually wished I'd come there more, but it was just too close to my dad. I mean, it was right, kind of right behind Caddy Corner, and I didn't want to deal with that. I wasn't sure if he was, because I was 14. He could have got the cops and drugged me back home, and at that point he wasn't. So I didn't want to get too close. And I spent many, many, many a night sleeping. There's a golf course that I like because after sundown, there's nobody there, and sleep in the sand trap. The sand stays warm for a little bit after the sun goes down, and yeah, it was rough. I spent in the winters. I'd sleep and if I could find a car unlocked, I'd just crawl in the back seat until I got the ever living shit kicked out of me by some guy come out going to work next morning, see me laying in the back of his car, and I never took nothing. I mean, there's many times I couldn't tell you how many days I'd go without eating anything, and I never so much as took change out of anybody's ashtray. That wasn't me. But this guy found me in the back of his car. I'm just a kid, and he's a full-grown adult, man. I don't know if I lost consciousness, but and I didn't do that again after that. But yeah, so it was off and on for about 2 years. And see, I should have been a freshman in high school. And after that first year, it turns out that because I wasn't going, the police and the court systems really started hassling my dad, and they're threatening to lock him up if I was truant anymore. So he tracked me down because I still ran around with my brother. And my brother was living in a place that my dad knew, so he knew he'd get a hold of my brother, could get a hold of me. And I don't remember exactly what was said, but it was basically, just go to school, get them off my back, and I won't bother you. You don't, I'll drag your ass back home and you'll be sorry, sort of thing.
That's so he can come find you for that, but he's an elder in the congregation or whatever, or he has been in the past, or if nothing else, he's one of Jehovah's Witnesses uh, and a father. Um, where's the love? Where's the hey son, come back to Jehovah if he believes that's the truth, and the you know how are you doing? Would you like a sandwich? I don't know, like just where's the love? In this scenario, he's just coming to you to get the authorities off his back, and you're
Yeah.
just a young kid.
And so I did. And yeah, I apologize. I'm kind of all over the place. Going back a little bit,
No,
right
that's all right.
right after I left, because I was still 14, ended up having a baby, um, which was just mind blowing when I think about it now. My youngest is 14. um, so yeah, in that 2 years there, did gotten with a girl and who was much older. She was in her 20s, and she got pregnant. And after her parents found out she had the baby, she got thrown out of her house, went to live with an aunt. She got thrown. And I was doing what I could, but I was a homeless. I didn't have anything steady in my life, and so she ended up getting married and someone in the military, and then started moving all over the country. But that
So
happened.
she was quite a bit older than you then if she was getting married, right?
Yeah, she was in her, I believe, early 20s,
Gotcha.
when we had met, and I may not even have told her how old I was. I don't quite remember, but yeah. So I had a child, and amongst that, which took me into court for child support. I was underage, so the judge said I'd bring my parents in. I said, "Well, my mom's dead." I said, "I haven't seen my dad in a couple of years." So they emancipated me, so they could proceed with the court thing and get awarded child support, which worked out great for me because I've been trying to get, like an apartment, or because I was working in between these times. I lied about my age. I was working at car washes and stuff like that, and then got into the field I'm in. But so actually getting emancipated really helped me because then I could get, an apartment, stuff like that, being under the age of 18. But
You would think, and maybe I'm just looking at this through today's lens. Back then, it may have been different, but if the situation was reversed and you had a 22-year-old woman, a man, and a 14-year-old girl, they wouldn't be emancipating somebody. Like, this is statutory rape, right? And I don't know that was the case back then, or if it's just it's okay because it's a guy thing that a lot of people say. But regardless, you're not really ready for any of that at 14.
no.
And
And it's weird because not the only person who ever brought up statutory rape down the road was my dad when he found out about the whole situation. And then I didn't even think about that, but being in court and stuff, and nobody ever questioned that ever. But yeah, it had been the other way around. It might have been a big difference, but
absolutely.
but yeah, and again, I think I'm kind of all over the place, but there was some friends that actually, when I was going to school, I had a friend of mine that noticed that I was wearing the same clothes every day, and noticed, rapid weight loss. And so he figured out what was going on. So he'd bring me over to his house after school and, feed me. And, I was really self-conscious about a lot of that stuff. Nobody else was home. I'd jump in the shower, and well, then his mom started catching on. It was my friend, his sister, and his mom that lived there. And well, then she would basically pulled me aside one day and told me anytime I wanted to come over, get something to eat, do some laundries, that I could. And I just never really did. I'd still go with my friend, and then eventually she asked me if I just wanted to move in with her. And so I did that around the age of 16, I believe. Yeah, because she took me to get my driver's license. And it was kind of funny because their last name was the same as mine, and me and her son, our birthdays were one day apart.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so we always used to tell people we're belated twins, but
Wow, that's weird.
yeah,
That's quite an interesting circumstance. Um, what a lovely lady
yeah.
take you in. Just what a contrast. Like, where were the elders, or like the congregation that you grew up in? Why was no one else like taking you in or helping out or anything? You know?
Well, yeah. At this time, that's when we had moved. So yeah, we were 2 hours away from any of my old family or friends, and actually about the time before we left, me and my brother were getting labeled as bad association, because of the stuff we were getting into, and so we were kind of getting marked before before we even moved. And then the congregation we went to, once we moved, there were no kids. There was none. I mean, nobody my age. So I didn't know anybody there. And I said, then shit went south pretty quick, after we had moved. But yeah, and no, I didn't have anybody. But yeah, it was wonderful, and that went great for a little while, and then my friend and his mom got into it, and he took off, and she said I could stay, and I felt really weird about it, and so that kind of started a series of, well, staying here, staying there. I get an apartment for a little bit, and I couldn't keep it, and that went on for until about 18. And then this whole time, I just heavy into drugs and drinking and partying, but I was working full time and trying to start a life. And uh, throughout the last probably couple years, in that time, like 17, 18, I started get a relationship back with my dad. Um, he was always a mechanic, had a new mechanic shop up there, so he'd get me a job. He helped me get my first car. Needed work, he worked on it. He'd give me the Watchtower and Awake every chance he got, and I'm pretty sure I only missed maybe one or two memorials throughout all the years. That was one that I always kind of went for him, but I always thought too, well, at least I'm doing this. Um, and then about at 18, I met my ex-wife, and she got pregnant really quick and moved in. We were married in no time, and that started my journey back. Of I already had one child that I wasn't able to take care of or provide for, and I wasn't with the woman that I had the baby with, and I didn't want to do that again. So
Did you see going back as kind of like chasing stability, or did you want something, that stability or hope for your kids, things like that?
It was the kids. I said she was just pregnant, but I had a lot of guilt. Like I said, throughout this whole time, I truly believed. I still had believed everything. I just couldn't do it. So I spent all them years partying and just waiting for Armageddon. I knew it was going to get me. I just didn't know when. And so then, I got married, and she's going to have a baby, and I wanted to change that because I'm bringing somebody else into this world. I don't want them to have my same fate, I guess. And I wanted to do the right thing, and in my mind, that was the right thing. Um, and she agreed to look into it, and so we went to my dad's congregation, and she said, "I'll go once and see how it is." And of course, they knew we were coming, and I didn't know anybody there but my dad. But oh, total love bomb! I mean, just love bomb. And I felt a little out of place at that time. I had hair down to my waist. I had long, long hair, and I always felt guilty and uncomfortable about not about having it, but about going into the kingdom hall with it. And everybody was super nice, and she says, "Yeah, I'll give it a try, and see how it goes." And so about that time, my dad and my stepmother, they've been through off and on, off and on, off and on, off and on. I mean, she was horribly violent. I mean, this is stuff I witnessed while I was still living there, but she buried a high heel in the back of his neck one time. She pulled out her pepper spray and maced him over the dinner table. She drove a car through his shop and pinned him against a wall. I mean, she was, yeah. Anyways, but so they were finally done. So he decided to move back down to his hometown, the home congregation stuff. So he moved with my younger brother and sister. And then shortly after that, at that time, my brother got married and had a couple small kids. Well, they moved down there, and he was going to start going back to meetings and get his life straight. And so I didn't really have anything left there for me. So I went back and started the very, very slow process of trying to go back. I truly believed it was the right thing to do, and I really thought I wanted it. I had too much stuff, and that smoking was one that I just always had an issue with. I just always back and forth at that. I smoked a lot of pot, a daily pot smokers, and it's just something I fought with, and I fought with, and I fought with, and it took years and years and years of, well, I'd go long enough to be able to start giving talks and become an unbaptized publisher, and then we'd fall off and not go for months and months and months, and I'd start smoking again, and then we'd try again, and this whole time my marriage is just something that should have never happened.
Can I stop you for a second? I just want to, before you get into your marriage, all these years that you believed it wholeheartedly, but you were just kind of waiting for Armageddon. You knew you weren't going to make it. Didn't feel like you could live the lifestyle, let's say, of Jehovah's Witnesses. Did you feel tremendous shame, like you were a horrible person? How did you feel about yourself, constantly measuring yourself against this, witness ideal of sorts?
The several years from I use 14 because that's when I left home, but from then till probably 20s, I didn't really feel a lot of shame. It was more guilt, I guess. I felt guilty that I wasn't at that time even trying really to live up to the standards, and I had no interest in going back at that time. So that stretch of time, it just, other than living in fear, God forbid there was a loud boom in the night. That's it. That was Armageddon. I was terrified, and but other than that, I just accepted that this is how I was living, and I knew the consequences, and I was fine with it, I guess, to use that term. But it wasn't until I got married and started having kids that then I started feeling shame, and because I'm still not doing what I need to be doing, and now I'm putting their lives on the line. I'm the head of the household. I'm supposed to be the spiritual head. I'm supposed to be doing these things, and I just couldn't do it. And so I felt miserable for a long, well, I mean, up to just recently over that, of thinking about my kids and not doing right by them.
Yeah. And just for those listening who don't know the difference between guilt and shame, guilt is I did a bad thing, and shame is I am a bad person. And so you just kind of felt like you were doing bad things at the time, but once you had kids, you started looking inwardly and kind of saying, well, I'm just a bad person who can't get my act together for my kids. You're kind of making it more personal about yourself.
Yeah.
I can see that. I can totally see that. Kids change your perspective, right?
Yeah. It, because up to that point, the only thing my dad could really throw at me is, don't you want to see your mother again? Don't you want to see your mother again? But then once I started having kids, then, it was, you're going to kill them kids. Those kids will die because you. If you die, those kids die. I got that all the time. I never could shake that. And it made me feel horrible because as much as that bothered me, it didn't bother me enough to make the changes that I, would need to make to be, you know, a good JW. But no, and I never felt part of. It's kind of weird to explain because the congregation is people who've known me since before I was born. I've known almost all the people my entire life, but I never really fit in. I just I wasn't spiritual enough. I wasn't, I wasn't clicky enough. Um, so even though I felt completely comfortable as far as knowing the people, I just never really felt part of the group, I guess. But
Sure. I mean, it makes sense. I think there's a lot of us that can identify with that. They can identify with being around. And I mean, let's face it, there's almost no lonelier place in the world than being around a group of people, around people, but you know you don't belong. You don't fit in. And that's a horribly lonely place to be. Um, so I know I kind of took you offline. So you were starting to talk about your marriage and how I think you said you maybe should have never gotten married. What was that? What was going on then?
it was just bad from the start, and again, we should have never been together ever under any circumstances, let alone for 18, 19 years and have 4 kids. I was just really stuck on. I just wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to, and I always wanted that. I always wanted the family, the wife, the kids, the typical family life. I wasn't, maybe I got all my partying out in my, my preteen and teen years, but by the time I turned 21, I didn't even really have any interest in going to the bars or anything. I wanted to be home. I wanted to be with my kids and family, and so I really, really tried to make it work. And she had a lot of anger and violence issues initially in the beginning, and then that kind of faded out. But she cheated a lot, all the time, and she would disappear for. I remember the first time our oldest son, when he was first born, maybe 2, 3 months old, kind of cliche, but she went out for milk and didn't come back for like 3 weeks. And just never had an explanation for where she was, what she was doing, I found out many years later, she was going to visit, ex-boyfriend and stuff like that. But this went on, and I forgive her. And at this time, neither one of us were baptized, so the elders didn't get involved. They didn't care. They didn't, wasn't really any of their business because we weren't real part of the congregation yet. And this went on for several years. And then kind of a little bit of a side story, but it kind of ties into this. One of the affairs I found she had was with my little brother that went on for years. So that kind of takes me back to my little brother. About the time we all moved back down here, he started having some real substance abuse issues with alcohol, and he was huffing carburetor cleaner really bad. I mean, bad. He was put in the rehab for that at least once. Been in and out of jail. This is all before he was 20 years old. Of course, you live in a small town. Once you get a reputation, the cops are always looking for you. And he was basically marked by the congregation. Was told that, we have a lot of cousins all our ages and stuff that we used to all hang out together, do stuff together. Well, he started getting shunned, and he was never baptized. Was told everybody to stay away from him. And I didn't know about the affair at that time. But some things transpired. He went to prison for a couple years for riding a four-wheeler on a revoked driver's license. That's what they got him for. But he had been in so much trouble. So when he got out of prison, then he was really marked. And he tried, he was only out for a very short time, but he tried, and he was just completely ignored by everyone in the congregation. And he killed himself. He ended up hanging himself at the age of 20. And my dad blamed the local brothers for not helping or supporting him. I blamed and I didn't know about the affair at the time, but when I found it later, I blamed my ex-wife for having the affair, because I guess she said she basically ended it with him right before he killed himself. So nobody really knows what happened, but so yeah, that was rough. People that completely marked him and wanted to make sure nobody had anything to do with him, they were all at the house when his body was still hanging in that garage. A couple phone calls, you got everybody, calling everybody. Pretty soon, people that not only had no time for him, but was going out of their way to try and keep people away from him. Now suddenly everybody gave a shit, and that was the proudest I've probably ever been of my dad. Because actually the circuit overseer happened to be in town that week, so he was there, just maybe nauseous, walking around telling everybody, the police and the parents, well, I'm the circuit overseer for the local congregation, and like, who gives a shit? And so a couple of the other elders showed up, and I remember my dad telling him, he says, "You get the hell out of here." He says, "You wouldn't help my son." He says, "I'd be damned, you get the hell out of here." So I was really proud of him for that. And
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's awful. And um, just how obviously he had a lot of problems. Obviously he had his own um, things that he was running from, through his addictions and such, and whatever he was involved in. But it's just really sad that he had all these people judging him and not thinking he was worthy to be around. And then suddenly, when there's gossip to be had, when he, has killed himself, um, suddenly here they all are.
yeah,
And it's really gross how Jehovah's Witnesses will sometimes flock to awful situations, looking for the latest gossip. Maybe some of them do care genuinely as well. Who know? You can't know everyone's intent, just like you can't know your brothers, can't know everything that was involved there. But uh, again, where were they all that other time?
yeah,
I remember when the elders were interested in my younger brother and where he lived, because they heard he was living with a girl. Probably from my dad, who's an elder, probably turned him in, and they were looking for him, and they came to me, and I said, "No, I'm not. I'm not giving you the address. Like, I know what you're wanting. You're not going over there to help him. You want to go over there and disfellowship him. I went and knocked on doors till I found my brother. You go find him. Leave your 99 sheep, find your one lost. That's in this situation, like, where were they all this time this young man was hurting? Again, but when something bad happens, now all of a sudden you have everybody there in the gallery watching. It's just it's awful. And good for your dad for speaking up. Good for him.
yeah. I can remember walking into the house. I don't know, was to go to the bathroom, get something to drink, and I just remember several of my cousins on the phone, and it just, oh my gosh, did you hear? Yeah, it's true. I mean, it just, oh, I was so infuriated. It's like, who can call the most people? Who can, it just, oh, it made me sick. But yeah, I guess I forgot to mention, because this would have been 99 when my younger brother hung himself. My stepbrother, he hung himself in 94 on Memorial Night. So we had that was, oh, he lived far away at that time, so it wasn't right, in our faces, but it was still, I mean, I didn't grow up with him my whole life, but that was still pretty rough. He was a good kid.
Again, that's terrible. I mean, you just see the pain in this family,
Yeah.
The abuse, the loss, the substance abuse, the suicide. It's just this transference of pain throughout, this dynamic of your family, and it's just it's rough. I'm sorry that you all had to go through this. Nobody is winning here. Everybody's hurting, and the pain is just being transferred over and over and over from person to person. Yeah, that's awful.
Yeah. So yeah, so I was married in '95, and then my younger brother, he committed suicide in '99. So then it was early 2001. I started finding out about some of my ex-wife's affairs that she had had. I found about one, and I just couldn't get past it. There's a lot of hurt there, a lot of pain, and I really struggled with that. Well, because there was just so many other unanswered questions. Like all the time, she would just take off. Sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks, and just come back and just I couldn't get anything out of her as where she went, what she did, and so I just couldn't get past it, and it was really causing a lot of problems in our marriage. And by this time, we had two kids. I think we've been 5 and 3 at the time, and there's no way I wasn't taking a toll on them. So kind of a weird part of the story, but and just home watching TV one day and happened to be watching Sally Jesse talk show and comes across the TV screen, says, "You want to prove to a loved one that you're not lying to them, call us and come take a lie detector test." And my wife goes, "I'll do that. You want to do that?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll do that." I was just kind of joking. She got on the phone with them, and I think it's 2 days later, we were on a plane to New York to be on this show. And at that time, she had told me about one affair, and I believe she was under the understanding that that is all I was going to want to find out about. Well, by this time, knowing that she had cheated once and just all the stuff coming back to me, and just this didn't make sense, this didn't make sense. So we get to the show, and I had questions about my younger brother, if something was going on with them, and she wasn't expecting that. So, long story short, went on the show. I begged her if there's anything she wanted to tell me before we left, tell me now. We'll work it out. Don't take me halfway across country and embarrass me on national TV. And I would never do that. And so, go to the show. She lies horribly, according to the guy that did the test and stuff, and that she had
Like a
multiple.
lie detector test or
Yeah,
something? Okay.
yeah, I did a lie detector test, and she failed miserably. About as bad as you could. And according to the test, she'd had multiple affairs. She had a several-year affair with my little brother, and so I got up, pulled my wedding ring off, threw it, and walked off the stage. And we were still in New York for like another 2 days before they sent us home. So by the end of those 2 days, she had convinced me that it was all for show. It was a stupid TV show. It's for ratings, and okay. She had me pretty well convinced of that. And we get home, we fly home, walk in the door, I turn on the TV, and it just happens to be about the last 15 minutes of a different Sally Jesse show. Same circumstance. Husband, wife takes a lie detector test. She passed it with flying colors. And that just, I knew then. So I found out about the affair she'd had with my brother and other ones as well. And she was actually pregnant at the time with her third child. And it was in the past. He's dead and gone. We got another child on the way. She convinced me that, we'll get through this. It'll be fine. And that was the time when I thought in my head, the only thing that we hadn't tried was to really give the truth a shot in our marriage and in our lives. And, of course, because that's the only way you can be happy. Without that, it's impossible. So
Was it the Secret to Family Happiness book or something like that? They always had these books about family happiness. Jehovah's Witnesses have the happiest families. So Family Doctor was in.
yeah. So that and it wasn't overnight, because this would have been 2001 when we went on the show, and I believe it was around 2003 or four. That's when I pretty much gave up, because at that time I was still back and forth with smoking pot, and I always struggled with cigarettes, still do. But that was when I threw it all out, and just really tried. And I think it was 2005 when my youngest son was born. I was 30 years old. That's when I got baptized. Out of all this time, and all at 30 years old, and I
You're
really,
like Jesus.
yeah. Actually, I beat him by what, 2 years, something like that.
Yeah, you're in your 30s.
Yeah, but and then shortly after that, my ex-wife got baptized, and it didn't help. It actually made things worse because now I always knew what was expected of me, but now it was really expected of me. And like I said, I smoked pot off and on all that time. So I quit smoking pot and I started drinking. And I just, a little something to, unwind. I needed a little something. My life is still, my marriage is still awful. It was, and, uh, and I took to it real fast. And I had always been a casual beer drinker, but I started drinking Bacardi just straight. And it got to where I was drinking a fifth a day. Actually, I was super hungover when I got baptized. I was afraid I was going to puke in the pool. But yeah, I remember that. That was, boy, that doesn't tell you something. But
Yeah, I was gonna ask, did you feel like you actually drank maybe more around that time? Like, were you feeling a weight or a pressure or just an inauthenticity about getting baptized or something that was, driving that?
yeah, I don't know exactly. I just remember that the first time when I drank like a triple shot just straight, and I felt it course through my veins, just this numbness, and I loved every bit of it. So I mean, I think I started self-medicating like from the very beginning.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I
You
mean,
know,
there's a lot of pain to self-medicate there.
yeah, and I tell you, I, like someone injected me with something. I mean, I felt it go, and from the time I took that first heavy drink, oh man, it was years before a day went by that I didn't drink. It was every day, and it just got more and more. And it, I was fortunate throughout all this time. The time I was 15, I lied about my age and got a job working in an automotive body shop, fixing painting cars and stuff. And I've done that ever since. So that's, I've built up. I have a really good career. I'm an A technician. I make decent money. So, financially, it wasn't hurting us. And I was never like a mean, abusive drunk. I was, kind of the fun, stupid one. And so it just never really caused a problem, you know, in our marriage that I thought. So it got out of hand. And everybody knew it. There's times I go to the meetings and, I'd have, brother lean down and says, dude, you smell like a brewery, and just you could smell it coming out of the pores, and, everybody knew it. And, so I guess when I say that was a time I really tried to do all the right things, I guess I didn't entirely, but because that's when the real heavy drinking started. And
Oh, you were still trying.
yeah,
You just had some issues, right? I mean,
yeah.
it's not like you weren't putting an effort.
So we had our fourth child about that time, and my dad was constantly trying to convince me that, because he had moved to a different city that was about 45 minutes away. My sister moved with him, and he continually kept trying to get me to move there, because actually it was a city I had worked in. So, I was driving quite a ways for work, but he said, oh, the congregation's way better. That you get a lot more help. You'll get, and so we did, found a place and moved. And that's when things got even worse, even went more downhill. I happened to start a new job. There's a guy that I used to run around with that was the painter there that was, we hit it off again. And man, before I knew it, I was doing a lot of drugs again. And I started getting into heavy drugs, doing a lot of cocaine, and I was full blown smoking cigarettes and smoking pot again, and I was drinking. I was still drinking the whole time, and I actually went to the brothers. The first time when it first started, I was smoking cigarettes again. And they just told me to work on it and they'd check back in with me. And that was the end of it. No reproof, no, okay. So now, had that been my previous congregation, I would have been disfellowshipped right then and there. Because actually, my sister was disfellowshipped for smoking a cigarette one time. She
Oh,
got
really?
reinstated, but that was the reason. So I really fully thought that's what was going to happen. And I left with nothing, not even a smack on the hand. And then that was, I think, 2 months later, that's when I started smoking pot. And so I went to them again. I said, man, I hadn't quit smoking cigarettes and now I'm smoking pot. They said, well, we'll put you on private reproof. Just get your act together. So then I went back to the third time with, I'm doing cocaine now, still smoking pot, still smoking cigarettes. They put me on public reproof. Even my dad goes, what do you got to do to get this fellowship around here? Kind of jokingly about it. And things got so bad that I packed up my family in the middle, not the middle of the night, but like rapidly, like over a couple of days. And we moved out of the city, quit my job to get away, just kind of funny. We ended up living in a old caretaker's house in a cemetery. Creepy as shit. I loved it. I didn't think the kids were gonna do it. They thought it was kind of cool too. But yeah, it was a
That's a
house.
unique living situation.
Yeah. But it was the old caretaker's house, and I mean, windows were boarded up. The rent was going to be like 200 a month or something. I was paying 1,000 before, and I'm like, we can make this work at least to get out, out of the situation. And we did, and I cleaned up, and didn't have any issues with any hard drugs or anything from that point on. That would have been around 2000 and probably 8. So then the house that we moved into in the cemetery is back in our old congregation. So I'm going back there again. And things within my marriage went from bad to worse. My ex-wife's having multiple affairs again. She was doing a lot of sexting and video sexting people online, and she had burner phones because that was her thing. She'd always, here, look at my phone. I'm not doing anything. Look, I don't want to see your phone. And then found out she had like 3 or 4 other phones, and so things were kind of getting bad between us. And we always went out once a year for our anniversary, tried to just still do that. So we went out this one year. I think it had to have been around 2008 or 9, maybe somewhere around there. And a good friends of ours, another baptized couple that we'd known for years and years, and liked a lot of the same things. And he liked to go out and have a good time and have a few drinks, and so did his wife. And over the years, we'd always joked about messing around, swapping wives and stuff like that. It was always just joking. And they went out to dinner with us, ended up back at our hotel, and our hotel had a hot tub. And long story short, that we ended up fooling around and swapping partners basically. And next day, we all decided that we needed to go to the brothers. So we did, and I refused to go before the congregation that I went back to. And so I called the brothers that had already dealt with me on so many other issues at the other congregation. And they said, well, just have Pontiac, just have, that them deal with it. And I said, no. I said, they weren't there to help me. I said, I'm not going to let them judge me. So we ended up having six elders, 2 separate meetings, but then they combined them together and then separated them. And so that's how I ended up getting this fellowship. And, I was expecting it. I wasn't surprised. I was prepared for it. My family knew, my dad wrote me this long goodbye letter, because by that time I'd had a pretty good relationship with my dad. We were really close at that time. And, I knew I wanted to eventually go back there, but there was just, my marriage was just such in shambles, and I just needed to figure that out. So it was less than a year after we got disfellowshipped. Basically, my ex-wife up and left, cleaned us out, took all our money, took everything she wanted, and left. Moved, oh wow, way across the country. Some guy she met online, and that was very difficult for me. Even though it was the right thing, I was glad to a point. I was now left with 4 kids, and working 70 hours a week, trying to figure out, I think our youngest was 6 at the time, and he was having some issues. And that was a very, very dark period of my life. And that I thought would be the motivator to get me turned around. Because at this time, I still fully believed everything. Now I've got 4 kids, no wife, I've got nobody. Nobody, because everybody I knew, of course, is a witness. And yeah, and it was probably about 3 years after that. 3 years. I tried a couple times. It was just too difficult to go back. The whole come in late, sit in the back, can't talk. That was just too rough on me. And I tried it, and I really thought I could make it work. And about that time, my youngest son started having some real emotional problems. His school's calling me, telling me that he's talking about killing himself. He had approached me about it. We had some long sleepless nights trying to figure out that's too fresh for me. It just was too much for me. So I was frantic, but I was going to do whatever it needed to do. Well, come to find out, he was having sexual identity issues. He didn't know if he was gay, bisexual, transgender, and he was terrified of what I would think. And so, to the point that he wanted to kill himself. And so it was the moment he said that he was, bisexual, or just explained to me, he wasn't even sure where he was at. It was that second I knew that I could never be a Jehovah's Witness. My love for my child was, way outweighed, I guess, any belief system I had at that time. And so at that point I knew, okay, I'm done. There's no going back. There's no, they'll never accept this, and I will never not accept my child. So at that point I'd given up all hope of ever going back. And of course it gets back to my family, and I find out from my oldest daughter that my dad was just talking a lot of shit about me and about my youngest child, and calling him disgusting, and he raised me better than that, and what's wrong with me, and why would I let him do that? So it pissed me off bad, to the point that just perfect timing. This was all happening about the time the Leah Remini special came out about Jehovah's Witnesses. And I would never have ever watched that if it wasn't for the things my dad said that pissed me off enough to go, you know what, fuck you. I'm gonna watch this. And to be honest with you, I went into it thinking, I'm gonna see how much they got wrong. Let's see how much they really know about the Jehovah's Witnesses. And it was about halfway through that first part. It was just like a flip of a switch. Something clicked in me, and I said, "This is all bullshit, all bullshit." And then that, for I'm sure most people know, or many people know, that triggered I'm going to read everything I can get my hands on. I'm going to watch every video, And that went on about 2 years. So I may be off of my timelines a little bit, but yeah, because I think my ex-wife left, I think 2012, 13, something like that. And then I didn't wake up till like 2015. No, it would have been 16. I don't know, somewhere around there. But it's been a few years now. But yeah.
Got owe a little bit of a thank you to your father for pissing you off enough that it made you watch this. I think that all of us, kind of have one of those ironic thank yous to somebody out there who, whether it was the elders who never cared about us, or our family members that, started pre-shunning us before we were ever even out, or soft shunning us, or just, withdrawing love, or the abuse, or whatever it is. Like there's an ironic thank you to a lot of people out there that, you finally pushed the right button and made me wake up, whether it was me or you or somebody else listening. There's somebody out there that did a thing, and it eventually made us, gave us the courage to explore. And, Leah Remini's special about Jehovah's Witnesses, I was really, I always liked her show on Scientology. I always saw a lot of, a lot of similarities with Jehovah's Witnesses, even though there's also a lot of glaring differences. But to for her to give witnesses a voice was a beautiful thing that she did. And you're not the first person that I've had on the show that Leah Remini's episode on Jehovah's Witnesses or her Scientology episodes didn't woke up. So you're not the first person that's had kind of an experience where it was Leah Remini's show that really helped open somebody's eyes to freedom. So glad she did that. Shout out to her.
Yeah.
That was excellent of her to do that.
And I can't say that's what woke me up, but that's what started the process. Yeah, because it was, I stumbled onto your show, and it just something about hearing so many stories that are so different, but yet so much the same. And, I of course knew I was never alone in all this, but just to hear, this and just to be able to relate with those, that really helped. It's not a fluky thing. It's not just, one bad story here or there. I mean, it's global, and it's tremendous, the amount of people that sadly have to go through this.
Oh yeah. I mean, you'll be like episode 74 or something, but I mean, I could do an episode. I could probably do one every day if I had the time and energy and backing to do something like that, because there's so many stories out there, so many people that have been through this, so much more than you see through even podcasts or videos or that you see on Reddit, ex-JW Reddit or whatever. There's just so many stories. There's so many people going through so many similar things, even if some of the circumstances are changed. Yeah,
and I tell you what really did it for me was kind of the icing on the cake was the 607 teaching. Because that to me, everything was based on that.
Yes.
Everything. And if that's bullshit, it's all bullshit. And so that was the real sticking point for me. And it was not easy. I mean, it's still not. It's weird. All my life, I was waiting to die. I've always said I felt like I was on death row. I knew it was coming. I just didn't know when. And I knew how. For the most part, it was going to be Armageddon. And I can remember praying all the time, just, I don't want to watch my children die. Please, if that's what's going to take place, take me first, And, well, just to feel that way. And then, but it's weird now. That's something I struggled with. Not so much now, but like maybe even a year or so ago, I really struggled with contemplating death now, and I didn't really understand why. I'm starting to, why it bothered me so much more now than it did when I thought it was pending any day. So, I mean, it has not been an easy transition, but it's definitely worth every bit of it.
Yeah. I mean, I just remember at 38 years old when I left, I learned I was going to die someday. Like, that's crazy. Like, who finds that out that late in life? I remember talking to a child psychologist one day, friend of ours, and kind of telling her just how, like, as children, we were told we would never die. Or we were told things like, if a family member did die or a friend or whatever, that they were just asleep. And she was just mortified as someone who's in child development. That's horrible. It's horrible to do to your children, to equate sleep to death. First of all, that can give some really weird mixed messages to kids, but also just that either that you'll never die, or the fear sometimes that you're gonna die because you're just not good enough and you're gonna die any day. The guillotine is up there, and whenever Jehovah's lets the blade drop, it's gonna drop on you because you're not doing the right things. It's just like all of the teachings around death are really, really messed up. It's all very, very unhealthy, and it's it's just a shame. We just compare that and all of the issues with mortality that come around that, how much pain that's caused, and all because of an organization that, first of all, claimed some magic math, you know, time after time that was wrong. But, then, 607 is the basis for 1914. And you can just ask Google real quick, when did Jerusalem fall? And find out that you're 20 years off just right off the bat. Not to mention that there's no 0 year in their calculation, and like it's all messed up. And they believed it was going to be Armageddon anyway, and then transformed 1914 into the beginning of an invisible presence and stuff. It's just all made up, step by step by step. As they've been wrong, they just make up the next lie to cover for the previous lie that didn't come true. And it's just horrible to realize you've been tricked, isn't it?
Oh yeah, made me angry. Angry. So 45 years old. I can't say I wasted my life. I've got 4 great kids. I've got a career. So it hasn't been a waste. It just could have been used so much differently.
Sure. And let's also admit that's not just Jehovah's Witnesses that waste life. There are a lot of people who wake up one day. I mean, there's a midlife crisis for a reason. People sometimes wake up and are like, wow, I've just been kind of playing out a role that was given to me my whole life, and I have never really thought through what I'm doing in my life, and this doesn't really fit me, even though I've built this whole life, and so many people pivot, in around certain ages. But I read a story the other day on a forum I'm a member of. This guy's mom just woke up. She's 82 or 84.
Oh, wow.
And holy crap, to wake up in your 80s and realize that everything that you've lived hasn't been true, and all the sacrifices you made and everything that you did. But you know what? Still, whatever time she has left, she at least gets some sort of chance to be free, or some sort of chance to do something maybe that she was never allowed to do, that she wanted to do before her time runs out. And so, whether you're 82, 84, or 45 or 38, when I woke up, whatever you got left, one life, that's all we know we've got. Might as well make the most of it, right? Try to do something that you can look back on and feel good about.
Yeah, that's I said I've got 4 kids, so 25 to 15, and my youngest daughter, she's baptized, true believer, and still lives at home, so that's a little difficult. But what I've tried to instill in all of them is what I was told my whole life: there was going to be no future. There's no point in higher education. There's no point in a 401k or worrying about a retirement. You're not going to get there. Well, I'm getting there, and I'm not prepared for it. So I really try and instill that in my kids now. That even I've told my youngest daughter, I said, I promise you, you're going to grow old. You need to prepare for that. Regardless of anything else you do, you need to prepare for that. And so this is her first year. She's enrolled in college online, so I'm pretty happy about that. So fingers crossed.
Can I say that not only is that awesome that she's going to school, but also look at you. That's what a dad should be. Your daughter doesn't believe the same as you, and you're not kicking her to the curb. You're not shunning her. That's love. And the belief system that she has, and the errors of those ways, but you're not telling her she can't believe that way, or she has to get out, and you're helping her prepare for an eventual future, regardless of her beliefs. That's love. Love is loving someone even though you disagree. That's love. The opposite of that's control. That's what Jehovah's Witnesses typically do. So you're a good dad.
Oh,
You're doing these things for your kids,
thank
and
you.
that's a beautiful thing. You should feel proud of that.
Yeah, I try to, not tell any of them what to think, but try and teach them how to think. How to be critical thinkers, how to be, skeptical, how to, but the only conversation I really had with her about any of this is, I I won't talk about my stuff if you don't want to, and vice versa. I said, and I don't have a problem with anything as long as you don't start treating, me or your brother differently. And I did through this one. I said, don't be sending them a bunch of money. Yeah. And I said, don't do anything crazy, because you never know. They're packing to go bags and all that shit. And I said, as long, I don't care what you do. I understand it's your family, your cousins, your uncle, your grandpa. I trust me, I get that. Um, I'm fine with it. As long as you don't. I said, but that starts happening. I said, I'm going to strap you to a chair, and I'm going to show you everything I know.
Yeah, watch what you ask for.
Yeah.
But that's a boundary. You just set a boundary. You said, okay, here's the line, and we respect each other on both sides of this, and it's all good, right? And that's we could. It's such a shame because we could all have some sort of relationship with our witness families with just some proper boundaries, some healthy boundaries. Hey, you don't talk about your religious beliefs. I won't talk about mine or my lack thereof or whatever. And we can talk about the rest of life. But most Jehovah's Witnesses, unfortunately, don't have a rest of life to talk about. If they can't talk about being witnesses, there's not much else.
Right.
But so that would make it hard. But I just love that you're encouraging your daughter to do some healthy things for herself, but not necessarily discouraging her from being herself. Whoever she is right now. So, and that means that you'll be hopefully be a safe place to land someday if she ever needs it.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope she
Yeah.
still needs it, but
Yeah. So, you've been through so much. So today, does your family shun you? Are they like, I know you're shunned technically
yeah,
because you're disfellowshipped, but I mean, does your family shun you, or does anybody that
yeah,
you wish
hard,
you could
hard
really?
shot.
Okay.
And I live in the town that I grew up in, the town I was born in. I live a half a block. Actually, I walk out my back door, I can see my brother's muffler shop. I walk out my front door and I can see my brother's house. So I live very close to my brother. My dad, I don't run into very often, but I work. Actually, if I walk out my back door of my shop where I work, smoke a cigarette, I'm looking at the Kingdom Hall down the road. So there's a lot of people, aunts, uncles, cousins, people I grew up with that I run into all the time at the grocery store. And I kid you not, I've seen it several times. I've seen them even leave their cart and turn around and walk away. Like like I could kill them or something. And that's rough. When it's people you've known your whole life. Um, Fortunately, my brother, I'll give him credit. When I do bump into him every once in a while, ironically, it's mostly at the liquor store, but he'll he'll take the time to a couple minutes chit chat. Not he doesn't bring up any religious stuff. I don't either, and but just how's work going, how the kids, how that sort. So I'll give him credit for that. I appreciate that. My sister, she doesn't speak to me at all, and we were really close. My dad, I had very little conversation with him over the last probably 10 years, 8 years, something like that. But I fix cars. I'm a body man painter. So I've always done my family's vehicles. Anytime they got in an accident or needed something painted or a dent fixed, they always brought it to me. Well, they still were doing that. Would have absolutely nothing to do with me on any level. No conversation, no checking in. How you doing? Nothing. Hey, I hit a deer. Can you get this in your shop and get it fixed? And I do it. And then I would never hear from him again for a year or so. until something else would come up. Hey, this went out on my van. Can you do that for me? And I did it. And I got to the point where last time my dad called, I actually last two times I didn't even answer it. I never returned his call. I never. And then my sister messaged me, wanted to know if I was mad at him, and I said I don't have anything to say. You know.
Well, I mean, why would you be mad at somebody that shuns you and has treated you poorly? Um, yeah, I mean, you see, there's a lot of times in the organization, there's a lot of users. People use each other, use their brothers and sisters for things, and that, you're getting used, for car repairs, and good for you for setting another healthy boundary and saying no. Like, if you're not going to talk to me, I'm going to fix your car. Like, we either have a relationship or we don't,
Yeah.
and good for you for doing that.
Yeah. I said I still will have that talk to my brother because he's never treated me that way.
Yeah.
He's never completely. He's always been nice to me anytime we bumped into each other. But he doesn't call me. He doesn't. But just between the things my dad said about, my child, his grandchild, about me, that really crossed the line with me. And my sister, she had always kind of would send me a message every once in a while. And then after the last time my dad called me, and I'd heard he had wrecked his van, so I knew why he was calling me before he even called me. I had text somebody, I can't believe this shit. Doesn't fucking speak to me for several years. Now they fucking want something from me now. I exist. Well, I actually texted to my sister instead of the person I meant to text it to. So of course she shows it to my dad, and yeah. So I haven't spoke to my sister in years now. But
well, I mean, what you said was absolutely true. I mean, it's absolutely correct. Why would you think I'm going to fix your van? You just call me, you shun me and treat me poorly, and now you want something from me. It's not how life works.
yeah.
And so let's talk about your new life a little bit. What do you like in life today? And is there anything that you're looking forward to?
I enjoy just not having that constant guilt and worry in the back of my mind and worrying about my kids. And I mean, you always worry about your kids, but just that weight is just gone. And I still, it's still a process for me. I'm still, it was a big moment, waking and still, and I enjoy being a different father for my children, the father I should have always been, and just hopefully watching them grow and be whole as much as you can, I guess, in this world, and have a good life and just be happy.
That's beautiful. I mean, that's the simple things, right? Those are the things that matter. It's the relationships you have, the kids you have. You want the best for them. You're exploring your own life, the things that you have this life to grow. Now yourself, this is your first chance, as you're waking up to explore life and figure out who you are and what you want. And I mean, that's what we all want, is just a chance to live free and figure out what that looks like for us and what we're going to be proud of when we're on our deathbed someday. So I'm glad that you're getting that opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I said I'm still trying to figure it out, and I'm getting some help, and I said I lived my whole life not thinking there's going to be a future. Now I know there's going to be one, and I'm probably going to be in it for the next 20 years or so, and I want to enjoy it. My life's been a series of unfortunate events, and I can't say I haven't enjoyed life, but it's been rough, and I want to learn how to enjoy the rest of it, and I want to do all I can to prepare my kids for that. To instead of tell them, oh, you don't have to worry about that. You're not going to need an education. You're not going to need this. You're not going to need that. Yeah, you are. You're going to need all of it, and then some. And I just I want to do as much as I can to help prepare them before my old age and death comes, so that they're good and ready to continue on.
Yeah. Again, only get one life that we know of. Better make the most of it. So, you've got whatever time you've got left, and I love that you're actively participating in your own healing and trying to reach out for better things. That's what we all hope for the chance to do, right?
Yeah.
Is there anything that you'd like to say, like parting shot, piece of advice, something you'd like to leave the audience with, or somebody out there that maybe is listening that has been in a similar situation, or family or whatever? Is there anything you'd like to end with?
This is your life. You're the only one who experiences it, from cradle to grave. That's something I try and think about every day, that although our actions affect other people, in the end, every decision we make affects our life, and no one can live it for us. And as far as my family goes, um, nothing in particular, other than I didn't go anywhere. I didn't, I still live in the same house. I didn't leave you guys. And something I've always thought, how many people will spend hours reading reviews on Amazon or Google to buy a refrigerator? Good God, look into your beliefs, research them. There's a reason why that's forbidden. But just for anyone out there who's recently waking up, as I have been, and it's a struggle, but I'm already, it's been a couple of years, but I'm already seeing a different perspective of my future, and how good it will be. And you're not alone by any means. It feels like it a lot of times, especially when you lose everybody, but you're not alone.
That's beautiful. Well, I appreciate you doing this, Seth. I appreciate you. I know you're an avid listener, and now your story gets to help somebody else, like other stories have helped you. And that's, it comes full circle, doesn't it?
Yeah, I hope so.